Hey friends, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com, and I hope you're having a fantastic week. Today I want to share with you a very foundational principle that I use when I mix every single time, except for when I don't use it, and then I regret not using this principle. This will help you get better sounding mixes, save you tons of CPU horsepower on your computer so it doesn't choke, and help you mix in half the time. We're talking about implementing the Pareto Principle in your mixes. What is the Pareto Principle and why are we going philosophical today? Well, I believe that so much of mixing is a mental game. It's a mindset and not a plugin choice, a speaker choice, a converter choice, a platform choice. It's how you approach it mentally. And one of the most powerful principles that can be applied to almost anything is the Pareto Principle, which is named after an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, who kind of first coined the observation of this relationship in nature. So he saw it as an economic thing that 80% of the wealth in Italy was owned by 20% of the people. 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. He also noticed in his own garden, he was a gardener, that 80% of the peas that he was trying to grow in his garden came from 20% of the pea pods. Okay, he started to see this pattern, this 80-20 rule is how it's more commonly referred to. And then many people have written about this and have expounded on it in different areas. It's become a business principle, it's become a financial principle, an economic principle, it's become an athletic principle. It's fascinating if you see it and look for it. You see it everywhere in nature. I'm here to talk to you about mixing because that's what we're all about on this channel. That's what we're all about on this site, is creating music in the home studio. And I don't want you to waste time, and I don't want you to spend money you don't need to spend, and I want you to have more fun. And I have seen this principle applied to mixing always work for me. The only time it doesn't work is when I don't do it, and then I regret not implementing this principle. How do we apply the Pareto Principle to your mix? It's very simple. We think about what is the 20% of our activities in a mix that give us 80% of our sound, 80% of our results. What's the one or two small things that we do that really, at the end of the day, create what we hear as the mix? I would submit to you that that is your EQ and compression decisions. We've talked about that at length. And so I would submit to you that the smartest thing you could do is pick one EQ and one compressor to use before you ever even open up a session to mix. And even more specifically, I would submit to you that the fastest way to do that is to pick one channel strip plugin. What is a channel strip? It's as simple as this. It's an EQ and a compressor slapped together. Now think about this. You open up a Pro Tools session, a Logic session, almost any DAW is going to give you something like this. All your tracks and then a bunch of blank space. There's no EQ, there's no compression ready to go for you. Now some DAWs, I know that Reason has a channel strip all the way down, every single channel. I love that. Okay, Sonar has a built-in channel strip. A lot of DAWs are starting to do this for good reason, because this slows you down. And what slows you down even more is saying, okay, let's mix the vocal. Let's grab an insert, grab a plugin. Okay, which of my branded plugins? My Air plugins, these are, okay, the ones that come stock with Pro Tools, Focusrite ones, Massey, Slate Digital. So which EQ, which compressor do I use? This is where we lose time picking an EQ, picking a compressor, and inserting it, and mixing and matching and deciding what's going to be used on what. Did you know that back in the day when people mixed on analog consoles, they didn't make these decisions? Those decisions were made for them. Their console had simple tone or EQ controls, whether it was tone high, tone low, like back in the days when Abbey Road on the red consoles, or whether it was an SSL that had a nice 4-band EQ on the top with filters as well. The EQ was already built into the board. Same with some dynamics. A lot of boards have a compressor and a gate and a limiter already built into each channel. What this does for the mixer is he says, I don't have to think about what EQ or compressor to use, or even whether I should use EQ and compression. Instead, I'm thinking about what does this song need, and then I'm grabbing a knob and helping it out. The way we do this in the DAW is to grab a channel strip. My absolute favorite is the SSL. Okay, mostly because I'm familiar with SSL layout from working on them years ago, and I really like the sound of their EQ. You could use any channel strip. Pro Tools comes with one. It's called Channel Strip, and it's modeled after the Euphonic System 5 console. It's got an EQ with filters, a compressor, everything you need. Even if you don't have a channel strip, you can always grab your stock EQ and your stock compressor and have made that decision ahead of time that those two work in tandem, one after the other, as a virtual channel strip. View them as your DAW's built-in console EQ and compression. Pretend that your DAW is a console and the stock EQ and compressor or the stock channel strip is the default EQ and compression in your board. That's the console that you own. That's what you're going to use 80-90% of the time. How does this help you? It helps you in two ways. If I know ahead of time that I'm going to use my SSL channel strip or my Euphonics System 5 channel strip or my stock EQ and compressor back-to-back as my channel strip, then I'm not wasting any time thinking. I'm not wasting any time looking for a plugin, and I'm not wasting any time trying out a different EQ versus another EQ. Instead, I'm saying, let's go for the big wins. I know that 80% of my mix is going to come from what I do with an EQ and what I do with a compressor rather than which EQ and which compressor I use. If you do that, you will mix faster. You will end up having fewer plugins dropped in and out. You will save CPU power, and you'll have a really good mix. You will be mixing the way mixing was intended. Draw audio through your console, in this case your DAW, and grab your EQ and dynamics effects to tweak as necessary. Now, what about other EQs or other compressors that are different tone machines, as it were? I reviewed a few different ones over the years because there's other compressors and EQs that I like because of the sound they impart on the audio. That's okay. In fact, that's what people started doing after years and years of mixing solely on the console in front of them. They started to realize, you know what? I have a Trident console, but I like the sound of the Neve EQs, and they would rip out the stock EQ on one console, aka a Neve or an API or whatever, and they would bring it into their studio as an outboard gear, okay? A piece of outboard gear, and that's kind of how that whole thing started, swapping out different sounds, but they all came from different consoles because every console has its own sound. And that's okay. You can drop in a different EQ or a different compressor if you like, but I want to submit to you that if you want to mix faster and if you want to have a better sounding mix, then all the swapping out of EQs and compressors is just changing the sound. Maybe making it better, maybe making it worse, but it's definitely not giving you the bulk of your mix. This right here, whatever tool you have, whatever channel strip you have, whatever EQ and compressor that you have in tandem, this is your bread and butter. And the moment you move away from thinking like this, I've done it recently. A blog post is going to go up on Monday, just sort of describing my horrendous last week of veering away from this process. It only can lead to hours and hours and hours of fiddling. And maybe you get a better mix. It's possible, but there's no guarantee it's actually going to help you get a better mix. It might help you get a different mix, but not a better mix. So you have to decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to fiddle or do you want to mix? Do you want to know that you're going to get 80% of the way there every time with this one decision? Or do you want to tweak and swap out and demo plugin after plugin after plugin in hopes that you might find the perfect sound? It might pay off, but chances are that it won't get you any farther than if you just made this one simple decision. Remember, the Pareto Principle, 80% of your results come from 20% of the causes. In mixing, 80% of your mix is going to come from 20% of your mix moves, and I would submit to you that those are your EQ and compression decisions. And that can all be done with one simple channel strip plugin that you've decided ahead of time to drop into every session you use and grab it and go as if this DAW in front of you, no matter what the brand, was your console. I happen to mix through a Pro Tools console. Maybe it's got an SSL on it, or maybe I'm using the channel strip that comes with Pro Tools there. It's a Pro Tools console. Or you mix through a Sonar console, or you mix through a Logic console. Whatever the plugins are, that is your sound. And every DAW has its own sound, but does one sound better than the other? Everyone's going to submit their opinion. But the smart mixers are going to grab what they have, their EQ, their compressor, and start sculpting and shaping the tone of their mix to get that result. That's all I have for you today, a little bit of a mindset video. Leave me a comment below and let me know, do you mix with a channel strip? If so, do you like it and why? If you haven't mixed with a channel strip, let me know if you're going to consider doing that right now. If you don't have a channel strip, which EQ and which compressor are you going to use most of the time? Make that decision ahead of time. Leave us a comment below the video. Sound off on your thoughts on not only the channel strip concept, but maybe Pareto's principle in general, the 80-20 rule in mixing. There's other ways to implement this principle in your mixes. This is one of the big ones. Let me know your thoughts on that if you've implemented in your mixes before to save time and get more bang for your buck. That's all for now. Subscribe to the videos if you like them, if they're helping you. Definitely join the mailing list if you want my free video series, The Smart Start to Mixing. It's there for you, absolutely free download, and a bunch of other bonus content that I don't post anywhere else. Have a great week. Make some great music. Looking forward to talking to you in another video soon.